My energy bills for 2025 were 43% higher than my bills for 2024 for similar usage. And I know I'm not alone in this because households in my region are seeing similar spikes. Manufacturing facilities and commercial businesses have seen a much more severe impact on their bills. We now live in a world in which the AI race is well and truly on, and it almost feels like the difference between winning or losing this race may just come down to a reliable supply of energy at scale. The AI genie is out of the bottle and it's here to stay, so rather than argue if we should or should not use AI, I'm simply here to shed some light on this narrative that AI and data centers are jacking up our energy bills, and then to discuss what I think we, as a society, can do about it. Let me start off by sharing what's going on in my region, and the specifics might be slightly different where you live, but chances are something very similar must be going on. The transmission of electricity in the US is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission through various electric grid operators called Regional Transmission Organizations, or RTOs. This may be oversimplified, but think of an RTO as a traffic controller, but for the flow of electricity from where it's generated to where it's supposed to go. The RTO where I live is called PJM, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. It started off serving those 3 states here in the US, but now it currently serves 13 states, either in whole or in parts, plus the DC area. I know, by the way, the US has the most number of data centers in the world. In fact, more data centers than the next 10 nations combined. And then within the US, the PJM region has the most number of data centers, with more on the way. More data centers means a higher need for energy, which means a need for more infrastructure, which means more shared costs, because the grid serves everyone. In the PJM, we've seen that there is an unprecedented surge for the demand of power over the past few years, and it's been forecasted that that number is going to keep going up. It has also been reported that by 2030, up to 30% of PJM's capacity to generate power is likely going to go away because of power plant retirements. And that's because of aging infrastructure, aging facilities, economic reasons, regulatory reasons, and so on. New sources of power are not coming online fast enough, and the capacity and the availability of renewable energy are just not adequate to meet all our needs. This has caused an imbalance in supply and demand of power. So therefore, power plants have had to continue working harder, especially if they are about to retire. If they are planned and approved to retire, they've been asked to stay online and continue operating beyond those retirement dates. And in a lot of those cases, this entails upgrades, expensive upgrades to existing equipment, maybe even adding in new equipment, which has led to a spike in what's called capacity price. Now, what is capacity price? Well, again, this may be oversimplified, but think of this as an insurance against blackouts, against power cuts. If I am a grid operator, I go to the power plants in my region and I say, hey, here's some extra money. Make sure you do what you must do so that you can continue generating power when time comes, when the need comes. And that, in turn, incentivizes the power plant owners to go ahead and make those investments so that they could continue operating moving forward. The problem, though, is that the cost of all of these upgrades is shared by all customers because, like I said, the grid serves everyone. You can see here that the capacity price in PJM has skyrocketed over the past few years, and that number is expected to go up once again. And those unit costs may look insignificant by themselves, but for the entire region, for the entire year, the cumulative cost is in billions of dollars, which, like I said, is shared by all customers. If capacity price ensures availability, capacity to generate power, the transmission and distribution costs ensure that we can deliver that power where it's supposed to go. And like I said, if the grid has to carry more energy, we have to upgrade our power lines, put in new substations, and so on, and the cost of all of that is also shared by all customers. Once again, you can see here that in just 1 year, the transmission and distribution costs, only due to data centers, has also been in billions of dollars, which, like I said, is shared by everyone because the grid serves everyone. Now, the fact of the matter is, energy bills, energy prices are going up. What can we do about it? And I know right about now it might be very tempting to say, dude, let's just stop building data centers, shall we? But unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, because not only would that mean less AI in the age of AI, but that would also mean that all of us as a society will have to take a step back from our digital lives, which is not reasonable in this day and age. It's not realistic to even expect that. I think we have a collective problem on our hands, and it requires collective action. Here's what I think we all could do about it, and it may sound a little complicated, but hear me out. Step one is for us as a society to get together and decide what our priorities are. Piece of cake, right? All of us getting together and agree upon something. But we need to decide what we want, by when we want it, and more importantly, what are we willing to trade for it, because we simply cannot have 100% of everything right here at the same time. If we choose to go behind something, chances are something else will have to take a hit and slow down, and we will have to be okay with that. So what we want, by when we want it, and more importantly, what are we willing to trade for it? Once we've sorted our priorities, we need to work on policies, because policies will determine how fast things get approved, built, and get connected to the grid. Our existing framework of policies and these approval processes was really put together for a time and for a system in which the growth in demand for power was predictable. So it was okay if some of these power plants took maybe about 5, 7, even 10 years in some cases. We would not necessarily have a problem. But now, data centers, large data centers at that, want to come online and get connected to the grid in about 2 to 3 years. And our policies have simply not been able to match up to that speed, not able to adapt to that speed. So policymakers and decision makers really need to get together and have a different look at it and trying to change this so that we can somehow compress that timeline of about 5 to 7 years to maybe down to 3-ish years. This traditional model of sharing the costs among all customers may also no longer be viable in all instances. These policymakers and decision makers also need to take a hard look at other ways, creative ways to fund these projects, creative partnerships, maybe even come up with new rate classes for large customers, or, dare I say, direct costs to large customers instead of sharing them with all customers. The next set of responsibilities fall upon the people who plan, design, build, and operate these power plants, and by an extension of that, on the tech companies as well. Once we've figured out our policies, we must consider building a data center and a power plant at the same site, or at the very least in close proximity to each other, but ideally at the same site, because that would mean that energy could be generated, stored, and consumed more efficiently at the same site. That would mean that data centers could generate their own energy, therefore don't have to import it from the grid. Tech companies would be paying their fair share, and because the import from the grid would not be as much as it would have been otherwise, that means less stress on the grid, and that means hopefully fewer capacity upgrades, fewer transmission upgrades, and hopefully fewer shared costs. Places where that's not possible, we must consider energy storage. And a lot has been said about conventional batteries, but I don't think enough is being spoken about thermal energy storage. Up to 45% of the electricity that a data center consumes is usually for meeting its cooling needs. Some of you may know from operating air conditioners at home that these machines are usually easier to run at night because the outside temperatures are cooler. That means your machines don't have to run as hard, and that often makes nighttime cooling more efficient and less expensive. Thermal energy storage operates on the same principle. Overnight, when the grid is less stressed, when the outside temperatures are cooler, and when it is less expensive to import power from the grid, chillers at a data center generate a surplus of chilled water and store it away at low temperatures. Once again, this may be oversimplified, but think of this as storing ice-cold water in a thermos flask, only in this case, the thermos is a large tank big enough to hold millions of gallons of water, and even better if it's underground because it stays insulated for a longer time. That's the nighttime operation. And then, during the day, when it's hot outside, when everybody else in the region wants electricity to meet their cooling needs, when the grid is more stressed and when the cost of importing power from the grid is more expensive, this data center could meet its own cooling needs for about 6 to 8 hours by using the chilled water that was generated the previous night. That means the chillers at this facility do not have to work at full capacity, therefore lower operating costs. It will not be importing as much from the grid, therefore less stress on the grid, and therefore, hopefully, fewer capacity upgrades, fewer transmission upgrades, and hopefully fewer shared costs. And a lot of that may sound very simple, too good to be true, and some of you may think, dude, that just sounds very complicated, but thermal energy storage is actually a proven solution. Here's one of our tanks that we have on campus, and just to kind of give you an idea of how big this tank is, you can see that there's a human being in that picture, just to kind of give you an idea of scale. This tank is big enough to hold about 4 million gallons of water. If thermal energy storage is good enough to hold and cool large university campuses, it's good enough to cool data centers. We've talked about priorities, policies, power plants, but I think us, the general public, also has an urgent role to play so that we can mitigate the impact of these costs on our bills. And the bad news, sadly, is that there's a portion of our bills that are just out of our control. But the good news is how we use that energy is still up to us. And right about now, I can feel you thinking, dude, I am not going to turn my lights off and sit in the dark so that I can bring my energy bills down. No, that's not what I want you to do. I think there are some practical steps that all of us could take, at least consider, so that we can bring our baseline costs down. We must consider, hopefully more than consider, and start by really understanding what our energy bills are, what our usage patterns are, so that we can hopefully measure and manage and bring our energy usage down. When possible, where possible, we must consider moving the use of high-energy appliances over to the off-peak hours, and hopefully, if that is done at scale, that will make a dent. Again, where possible, if possible, we must compare energy prices and energy suppliers, and hopefully, we will get something favorable. And if you have the option to pick favorable prices, maybe consider locking them down long term. Now, all of that is from an energy standpoint, but from an AI standpoint, there is an urgent role that we have to play as well. We must all work on improving our AI literacy, and by that I don't mean all of us have to code, but at the very least, we must start by understanding the AI tools that are out there, their capabilities, and more importantly, their impacts, so that we can knowledgeably decide how to use AI, where to use AI, and if to use AI. And it would be even better if energy companies and tech companies could give us a summary of our energy use based on our AI use so that we can make energy-conscious decisions. And these could also serve as great marketing tools for these companies to really promote their model efficiencies, their energy efficiencies, and maybe even help them stand out as leaders in sustainability. By now, you're probably thinking, dude, that's a lot to do. It's too complicated, and unfortunately, it is complicated. We do not have a single solution for this issue that we have on our hands. AI is opening doors to innovation, and it's creating breakthroughs, but each breakthrough runs on energy. energy that is often missing from the conversations and discussions about responsible AI. As AIs and data centers scale, they will compete with electrification, with manufacturing, with EV adoption, and so on for the same limited energy that we have, limited power supply that we have at the moment. We as a society are ambitious, but meeting our ambitions will require managing its consequences. We will need solutions at all levels. This is a collective problem that we have, and it will require collective action. All of that said, I am optimistic. I do think that we can make progress that is both fast and fair towards a future that is built upon responsible innovation, but only if all of us choose to do our parts. The question is, will we all choose to do our parts? Thank you.